Hello, my name is Payman Shamrazadi. Welcome to the Honest Hour podcast, where we share founder stories as they're building their early stage startups. Today, I'm happy to say I'm joined with Ron Peters, founder and CEO of Daylight Vision, the startup behind Cyfer, which is a secure work management and team collaboration platform that reduces interruptions for office workers so they can focus more often on deep work. We're here to talk about what it really looks like to build a startup from the ground up, the wins, the pivots, and the lessons that founders, can take from his journey. So with that, let me introduce Ron. Ron, welcome to the podcast. Please share a little about yourself and your background.
Thanks, Payman. Appreciate that. So yes, as Payman said, my name is Ron Peters. I've been in the software industry for longer than I care to admit, and I love startups. I'm a serial entrepreneur. My first job out of MIT was we did a video editing startup that made the first software think like iMovie, but back in 1992.
Mm,
And really cutting edge at the time. And we really knew we were onto something with digital video. And the first half of my career was digital video. I worked on the MPEG standards, MPEG 1, MPEG 2, MPEG 4. Um, that startup was first acquired by Avid, which was the market leader in digital video and film editing systems. So that's where I worked on MPEG 2. And then I went to Apple, pretty much the only big company I've ever worked for, and worked on the QuickTime team and MPEG 4 there. So, and also when we first started streaming video over the internet, built the first global content delivery network for streaming video. And at the time, Steve Jobs' keynotes were the biggest streaming events on the planet. Yeah, we crashed Australia's internet with one of those broadcasts. So that was fun time, really cutting edge. And then I left Apple and went into more of a business oriented
mm,
software. Started working with companies like American Express. Got into databases and security, and the cloud started becoming a thing, and really took my career in a very different direction. I learned a lot of technologies that I probably would not have learned at Apple. And then it came full circle. I started working with AT&T Uverse, built a platform that handled their video on demand workflow for their mobile and web products. So basically, HBO would have an episode of Game of Thrones,
yeah.
and HBO would actually deliver the raw footage to my system. My system would re-encode it and transcode it and compress it into the various bit rates and sizes and formats that were specified for the different profiles that AT&T Uverse had. And then we would put it on their content delivery network and integrate with their delivery systems and all of that. And that was all in the cloud. So if I hadn't left Apple, I would not have had the expertise in all of these cloud technologies to pull that off. And it was, very, I love new challenges, new problems, new technologies. And I like solving big problems. We all have little problems to solve along the way, but I like it in the structure or the goal of a much larger problem to be solved. So
I
uh,
love that. That's a very, very rich background, everything that you've done. That's absolutely amazing. So, and actually, this is a great segue when you're talking about problems. So let's talk a little about Daylight Vision. What's the core problem that your startup is solving, and what drew you to it?
so as a software engineer, we we do a lot of collaboration to work through what is it we're trying to develop. And then when we have a framework, we go into our offices and, we pretty much code in private for most of the time. And then we pop our heads out and and collaborate. And but the majority of the time we need deep focus time, and interruptions are very detrimental to that flow. It's like an artist, you know, you once you get into the zone, you have to stay in that zone, or else you're not being very efficient with your work. And
Yeah.
I think back in 2009, I think it was, Paul Graham at Y Combinator wrote a blog post called Maker's Schedule, Manager's Schedule.
Mm.
And it was about the dichotomy of the different kinds of people and what their schedules require. And managers, they just fill up their day with 30-minute slots or hour slots, and they're task switching very often. And it's a very it's the kind of schedule for people who have in power, right? It's just fit those slots in and get as much done as you can every day with that schedule. But makers, we need blocks of time, 3, 4 hours at a time, uninterrupted work. So that's been something, for designers, software engineers, a lot of different people, over the years. And that's always stuck with me over time. And about 2 years ago, I decided to go full speed into this endeavor and try to come up with a system that was unlike Slack, unlike email, unlike
Mm.
the things that ping you constantly and interrupt you all the time. What could we do differently so that those interruptions can either be delayed or just taken care of for you, so you can focus on your work. So we're taking AI agents and putting it into the workflow so that they can be not only things that you make requests of, because that's what a lot of people do. They go to Chat GPT, they say, hey, do some research, or read this document for me and summarize it and things like that. But what about the incoming requests? What about the people that are pinging you all the time? Hey, Ron, I need this, or Ron, what's the status on that? Our AI can handle those incoming requests for you by understanding the documents that you have, by understanding your previous chats, and you giving it background information so that if it can handle the request itself, it will. And then if it can't, then it'll defer to you. But if it can, it'll just take that request and handle it itself, so you can just keep working.
No, that's amazing. So the company name's Daylight Vision. The product is Cyfer. So that makes it indicate that you have a broader vision in mind. That Cyfer is the first product for Daylight Vision. So let's talk about a little about that from a strategy standpoint as you're building your company. You must have a long-term vision of where the company Daylight Vision is going, and you saw a need to build a product initially to solve a particular problem. Let's talk about that a little bit. What made you think about your company in that way? Most startups typically think of the product first and they build a company around it. Whereas it seems like you looked at a broader thing and you said, hey, we can build a company that's able to solve a series of problems, maybe in the same domain. And this is where we're first going to focus. So, what brought you to that?
So it's a really interesting path, really interesting journey. So the original idea behind Daylight Vision was actually a social network. And the the vision was social networking isn't about connecting with friends and stuff anymore. These platforms are for entertainment. Look at TikTok,
Yeah.
even Instagram these days. It's about reels. It's about entertainment. Um, you know, whether it's short form or long form, it's all entertainment. And I come from an entertainment background. My mom is a Grammy Award winning recording artist,
Amazing.
and she never got really paid for having some of the most iconic songs of the 70s. 70s.
Wow.
Their band didn't, recover all the advances against the royalties that the record label paid them. Did not recover all those royalties until about 12 years ago,
Oh my God.
from
Wow.
the 70s and 80s. So my vision was to create a platform where creators could actually get paid, and you didn't need to be a Mr. Beast, or one of these top 0.01% creators in order to actually get paid. And that was the original concept for Daylight Vision, is a social network. But social networks have a cold start problem. How do you get people to come into the network? And I decided that um, chat was a good solution for the cold start because it's inherently viral. You're not chatting with yourself, and you have friends you want to chat with, or associates of some kind, and we get people using chat, and it would introduce people to the entertainment platform. And over time, I realized there was absolutely zero money to be made in consumer chat. But there was this great technology that I was building on, and being an engineer and looking at a lot of technologies first, and the this new end-to-end encryption platform that the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force,
Yep.
had just ratified, solved so many problems for the security aspect of what I wanted to do about it, that I pivoted around this new technology. And this end-to-end encryption technology, I think, is as important to the future of internet communication as standardizing email was, or standardizing the web itself. You're no longer locked into WhatsApp or Signal or Telegram or whatever you're using. Um, the you're not locked into their platform anymore. This is an international standard that is designed for interoperability. So we're building the client and the server side. We're building the the entire infrastructure for it. But at some point, the server will get commoditized. Just like no one thinks about what email server you're using. You're using Gmail or Outlook. How
Hmm.
all that works underneath, no one cares. Same with the website. No one cares how the website is actually hosted, whether you're on Shopify
Yep. Yep.
or whatever. The same thing will happen with this. And we want to be the client. We want to be the Outlook of end-to-end encrypted messaging for the new generation of platforms coming out for the next decades.
Amazing. Amazing. So, okay. So, as a engineer and also a founder of a company, what's been the hardest thing to balance between building a company and building a product?
As an engineer, I love tech. I
Yeah.
love building. Um, the problem with that is you can get sucked into um, building something only for yourself
Yes. Yeah.
and not for a broader group of people. So you need to be out there. You need to be talking to people. You need to get
Yes.
out of your away from your desk, and actually make sure that what you're doing is a real problem in the real world, and not just something that you and five other people will use.
Hmm.
And that's been a big journey for me with Cyfer as well. Um, the core end-to-end encryption technology is very technically interesting, but very few people actually care about the pure security aspect of it.
Of course. Yeah.
And I have talked to those people, and they're really passionate about it, and I can't wait to sell the product to them. But they're a minority of
Hmm.
the planet. So what can we make that millions, millions, hundreds of millions of people are going to want to use in their everyday life? And you only find that out by getting out from behind your desk, stop writing code, and start talking to people.
Absolutely. I love that. So what did you learn when you do that? Did it cause you to change the product? And if so, how?
Yes, absolutely. At first, I thought security would be enough, and we were going to have a B2B go-to-market strategy because I was convinced that businesses were going to care that this was far more secure than Teams and Slack, and definitely more secure than email. Email's about as secure as carrier pigeon.
Yeah,
And it turns out that the businesses don't really care that much. They figure Teams is owned by Microsoft and Slack is, now they're owned by Salesforce. These are huge companies. It must be secure, right?
it must be
It must
secure.
be,
Yep.
yeah. What do you mean it's not secure? Of course it's secure. So there is an education aspect to it. And if you, as a startup, have to educate your market, you will likely go out of business. You, the first mover advantage is a myth. Um, the first mover ends up paying for all of the market education
Yes.
and
Yep.
all of the groundwork to be laid, and then the people after the first mover come in and actually make all the money. Facebook was not the first social network, right? Not by far.
Yep.
Go down the line. Well, Slack was not the first business chat application. Anybody ever use HipChat? You remember that? Okay, so it is. Once I realized how much education we were going to have to do for this market, I realized we needed to do something different. And internally, we've pivoted a couple of times. And what I ended up doing was pulling in some concepts that we were going to defer, start working on, next year and start integrating in. I decided that no, we need to do it now. And that's where the AI agents came in. It was always part of the strategy, but I thought we had time, but we don't. And right now is the right time for an AI agent based strategy. AI agents and agentic AI are in the zeitgeist right now. We don't have to educate people about it. We just have to deliver something that doesn't suck, something that actually solves a problem for people and actually gets the job done. And we don't have to educate people about what this concept is.
Sure. No, makes sense. Makes sense. So let me take the conversation a slightly different direction. So as a founder, you're out there talking to a lot of people. And I'm sure one thing you get a lot of is advice, suggestions, right? How do you decide, and in fact, let me also add that I bet a lot of this stuff that you hear in terms of advice for you is conflicting with each other. Somebody says go left, somebody says go right. And then somebody else comes, neither of those two are right, turn around and go back where you came from, right? So this is constant in this ecosystem. So how do you decide which advice serves you? How do you decide what or who to listen to? What have you in your journey of talking to as many people as you have? How do you decide who are the right advisors, who are the right people that can support you and your company in the direction that you want to go?
Great question. There's two orthogonal um, concepts, and sometimes they're in conflict, but you need to be able to address both. And one of those concepts is what are the core principles of your company? What are you trying to do from a vision standpoint that cannot change? But at the same time, it's a business. It is a money making venture. So the other axis is you need to make sure that what you're doing can sell and be profitable.
Mhm.
So how do you balance those two? So, you know, one of the things that for me has remained immovable is the security aspect of what we're doing. For me, end-to-end security and maintaining the security of the customer's data, and doing as much as we can on their local machine and not spreading their information across the internet or feeding it into untrusted servers, that for me is non-negotiable. It would be a hell of a lot easier to make a product that did not do that did not have the end-to-end security guarantees that we have. It would have shaved months off of our development schedule. And we had people saying, well, if companies don't care about security, then why are you putting so much time into this? And it's a fair question. I could definitely save time, which means, possibly make money faster by not doing that. But to me, security is one of those things that even if you don't think about it now, you will appreciate it later. And people will understand in the years to come why we architected it this way. So getting back to your question about how do you evaluate your advisors, you really need to make sure that the advisors are on board with your vision as well as helping you understand how to make money. If they're only trying to help you figure out how to make money and are willing to sacrifice your vision, probably not a good fit. And it is a dance, a balance that you need to strike, but definitely find people that are on board for your long-term strategy.
Okay, that's great. What's been one thing that you've stressed out about over time as you're building your company, and now you realize, you know what, you don't need to worry about it as much?
Something I don't need to worry about as much now. Not sure I've found that thing yet.
You're stressed about everything. So
there's money stress, there's product
yeah.
development stress. I think once we get our initial, once we get our public beta out, I
Mhm.
think that will be a very big stress reliever.
Yes, absolutely.
And then we can start getting real feedback, because there's only so many conversations you can have before someone uses it for real. So, getting something out there, getting in people's hands, and being able to iterate quickly, that another one of the fallacies is the launch. I do all of this stuff. I get everything lined up, and I push the button, and all of this work that I did is gonna um, result in an incredible number of conversions. In the first week I release this thing, that's probably not going to happen. You got to temper your expectations. Okay, so the best thing that you can do is set yourself up for rapid iteration, because it's all theoretical until it gets into someone's hands, and then people are going to
Yeah.
tell you what sucks and what doesn't, and you need to be able to move very, very quickly. I am looking forward to that part. That for me is going to be the fun part, getting it into
Ex-
people's hands and figuring out what to jettison and what to add to and what to build on. When I get to that point, then I'll be a very happy man.
There you go. There's nothing like actual customer feedback,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Absolutely. So what's one hard lesson that you've learned that you wish someone had warned you about earlier?
Um, for me, the difficulty of you know usually I'm a CTO or an individual contributor.
Okay.
Being a CEO is very, very different, and the all of the different things that you need to do to handle your marketing and your go to market strategy and all of that stuff are things that I'm learning. I'm not that is not my expertise, and I have been involved in a lot of startups, and you know and being at Apple, I mean, you've seen the best marketing in the world, right? But you don't have that kind of budget as a startup. So how do you do that? How do you uh, build your community around your product in a way that makes sense and is authentic is something that I personally haven't had to do before. So that is something that is, you know, a big learning for me, and is cool. It's enjoyable. It's part of the talking to people, right? You're just turning it into websites or blog posts or outreach, and it's very interesting, very different for me, and like I said, I love new challenges and learning new
Right.
things. So it's part of that.
So you've been getting comfortable being uncomfortable in a space
Right.
that wasn't yours to begin with. So going back in time, if you were to do it again, would you still take this path and say, yeah, I would want to be the CEO of this company and lead it versus being the technology arm of it and focusing on the product and the product roadmap?
No, I actually love this part. In fact, I
Okay.
probably would have front loaded it more
Okay.
with um, with market research and going out and talking to people rather than building. You know, as an engineer, I love to
Yeah, yeah,
build, and
yeah.
let's figure out. But the real world, you got to figure out what you're building first, and then build it. When I was at Apple, I actually left the engineering team and went over to product marketing for that very reason. I wanted to be closer to the customer and see how the sausage was made from that perspective, not just how to build it. So, I think that's always been part of my thought process on being close to the customer, so you're building what they want and not just what engineering wants to build.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Have you, as a founder, have you done anything unconventional that worked?
You know, um, I think I think a lot of what I'm doing right now is very not exactly deep tech,
Okay.
but it's borderline. And because of that, I've been very um, I've been very uh, deep and focused on the product development. What I'm really looking forward to, like I said, is when I'm getting to the go to market, and I think
Hmm.
that's where um, I'll have more experimentation time to try some unconventional approaches because I'm going into a crowded market.
Yeah.
It is. I think we have something that's very unique, very different, but just from a pure competitive landscape perspective, there's a lot of players in the space, and I know we're going to have to do some unconventional things from a marketing perspective to get some mind share. So not yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Amazing. So, thank you so much. Let me ask you one last question. So if you could speak to all your fellow founders out there, building companies, different industries, and everything they're doing, what is your advice to them? What would you recommend? And it could be business, technology, anything, but your experiences as a founder, you've been out there, building this product, talking to a lot of people. I'm sure you've been pitching a lot, trying to raise money. So given all that experiences, if you were to partake some of your experience and wisdom, what would you share with other founders?
I would say be prepared to be told your baby is ugly. you know,
Where have you
um,
heard that before?
it's really easy to get enamored with your concept,
Yes.
but you really need to get out there and make sure you have problem solution fit. The Before you spend so much time um, executing on it and building it, talk to people, get out there first. Doesn't matter if it's you know a whiteboard prototype. The more fidelity of a prototype, the better. But just anything that can show the concept, talk to people, and make sure that what you're doing solves a real problem for someone else, not just you. And be prepared for people to come back and go, no, no, that's not a thing. And, maybe the whole concept is flawed. Maybe you just need to tweak a little bit, but you'll never know if you don't get out there and talk to people.
Absolutely. I love that. That's so true. Ron, it's been a pleasure getting to know you better. Thank you so much for the time. It's been an amazing conversation, and I'm sure we're going to be in touch, and I really look forward to all the great things ahead for you, for your company, and say hi to mom for me,
I will. I will. Always a
Thank you.
pleasure, Payman.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ron. Really appreciate it. And folks, this has been the Honest Hour with Ron Peters. Thank you all for being a part of this journey with us. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.